We all know about the Pearl Harbor attack of 7 December 1941. It was a devastating loss for America and a huge win for Japan, although temporarily. We don't know the first ship that was sunk in that attack, but we do know that the USS Utah, Arizona, and Oklahoma were permanently lost. However, we do know the last ship that was sunk. Now that is a bit of a story. The Utah, a Florida-class battleship, remains at Pearl, right where a failed salvage attempt left her. 6 torpedoes were launched against her. 2 of them struck the battleship, while another missed and hit the cruiser Raleigh. The Utah rolled on her side and sank. The Navy tried to parbuckle her back to upright, but instead of gripping the bottom like the Oklahoma did, she slid towards Ford Island. The salvage effort was abandoned and she lays on the northwest side of the island today. The Arizona, a Pennsylvania-class battleship, also remains at Pearl. After one of the Japanese bombs detonated in a magazine, she exploded violently and sank. Her main armament was salvaged, but she was too badly damaged and she was left right there on the northeast side of Ford Island. The Oklahoma, a Nevada-class battleship, was parbuckled back to upright and raised from the bottom, but she was too badly damaged and so was sold for scrap. She was being towed to San Francisco Bay when her tow ships encountered a storm about 500 to 600 miles from Hawaii. She began taking on water and then sank, nearly taking one of the tow ships with her. The remainder of the ships were either still afloat or sunk but were salvaged and put back into service. One of those that made it through was the Uss Phoenix, a Brooklyn-class cruiser. She was laid down on 15 April 1935 by the New York Shipbuilding Corporation of Camden, New Jersey, and launched on 13 March 1938. She was christened by Mrs. Dorothy Kays Moonan and commissioned at Philadelphia Naval Yard on 3 October 1938. Designed and built under the terms of the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty, the Brooklyn-class cruisers displaced less than 10,000 tons, had a length of about 608 feet, a beam of about 62 feet, a draft of about 19 to 20 feet, a max speed of about 33 to 34 knots, and a complement of 868. Her armament consisted of 15 6-inch guns, 8 5-inch guns, 8 50 caliber machine guns, and 4 Curtiss SOC-1 Seagull scout aircraft. The catapult system enabled her to launch those 4 planes in about 6 minutes without requiring the ship to change direction, unlike an aircraft carrier which has to turn into the wind. The new cruiser set out on her shakedown cruise to Trinidad, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Puerto Rico. Remember Argentina there. The Phoenix transited the Panama Canal in 1940 to visit Chile, Peru, and various points up and down the west coast of North and South America, then going to her new home port of Pearl Harbor. The Phoenix was there when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, but escaped the attack unharmed for the most part. One account states she suffered a swollen barrel in one of her 6-inch guns. A bulge or swollen barrel is generally caused by an obstruction in the barrel. The shell, as it encounters this obstruction, has immense pressure buildup behind it until something gives. In most cases, this is the barrel, the bore. Of course, in more extreme cases, the barrel will burst or the breech will fly apart. By the afternoon of the attack, Phoenix was part of a task force hunting the opposing Japanese task force. In early 1942, she departed for the South Pacific, where she participated in a series of vain efforts to prevent the Japanese conquest of the Dutch East Indies. See my video, The Ship That Became an Island. That ties right in. She missed the Solomons campaign and spent much of 1943 in overhaul, but returned to active service in December of that year. Once back in the Pacific, Phoenix participated in General MacArthur's New Guinea campaign and then in operations to liberate the Philippines. General MacArthur was ordered by President Roosevelt to leave the Philippines in March of 1942. That is a story unto itself. The Japanese invaded and took over the island nation. Remember the Bataan Death March. On 20 October 1944, a few hours after his troops landed, MacArthur waded ashore onto the Philippine island of Leyte. That day he made a radio broadcast in which he declared, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." In June, she came under attack from Japanese bombers, but did not suffer any serious damage. She was part of Admiral Ohlendorf's force at the Battle of Surigao Strait in October 1944 and contributed to the destruction of the Japanese battleship Yamashiro, a Fuso-class dreadnought. The rest of her service was spent mostly in escort, and although accompanying ships which experienced several kamikaze attacks, the Phoenix escaped serious damage. The Phoenix was en route to Pearl Harbor for overhaul when Japan capitulated, ending the war. She headed home and upon reaching the Panama Canal on 6 September, joined the Atlantic Fleet. However, her status was reduced to in commission in reserve at Philadelphia on 28 February 1946. The reserve fleet, often called the mothball fleet, is to keep the ships afloat and in sufficient working order that they may be reactivated quickly in an emergency. She remained at Philadelphia until sold to Argentina on 9 April 1951. She was commissioned in the Argentine Navy as Desciente de October on 17 October 1951. After that, she was renamed the ARA General Belgrano in 1956 and upgraded in 1967-68 with new Dutch radars and British Seacat anti-aircraft missiles. Remember the Falklands War of 1982? Argentina took control of the Falklands from the British. The British felt that the islands were arguably too valuable to lose, so sent a task force to take them back. On 26 April 1982, however, General Belgrano and 2 escort destroyers were on patrol south of the islands. They were there to attack the British force on the northwest side of the islands. The Belgrano did have certain advantages against modern naval vessels. Her 6-inch guns would have made very short work of any British ships within 12 miles or so. The Belgrano's armor, while considerably lighter than that of a battleship, might still have been sufficient to provide considerable protection from the surface-to-surface missiles of the day. However, having virtually no anti-air or anti-submarine capability, her ability to decisively affect a modern naval battle was extremely low. On 2 May, General Belgrano and her group began repositioning towards the Argentine mainland. Unfortunately for the Argentinians, the General Belgrano had been detected by the submarine HMS Conqueror on 29 April 1982. Conqueror shadowed the group while the British government decided on the appropriate course of action. On 2 May, Conqueror moved into position and fired 3 conventional non-homing torpedoes at Belgrano. 2 of the torpedoes hit, one near the bow, the other about 3/4 along the length. The first torpedo blew off the forestem, the front portion of the bow. The second one punched through the hull, then exploded, causing extensive damage, including taking out the electrical power system, which prevented her from sending out a mayday. Since the electrical power system was down, none of the pumps worked, so the water came flooding in. One source states that even though she was at action stations, the ship was steaming with her watertight doors open. Captain Hector Bonzo ordered abandoned ship about 25 minutes after the attack, and shortly thereafter the General Belgrano slipped beneath the waves. 770 of the crew were later rescued, but 323 died. The captain of the accompanying destroyers claimed that because of the gloom and the electrical failure on the cruiser, they were unaware that the General Belgrano had been hit. They moved off and only noticed the absence of the cruiser several hours later. Inspection after the battle would indicate that one of the destroyers had been hit by that 3rd torpedo, but it failed to detonate. While in the service of the U.S. Navy, the USS Phoenix earned 9 battle stars for her service during the war. She was laid down in 1935, commissioned in 1938, fought at Pearl Harbor and through World War II, was decommissioned in 1946, bought by the Argentines in 1951, renamed the General Belgrano in 1956, and was sunk in the Falklands War of 1982. She was the only ship sunk by a nuclear submarine during wartime. Side note, I said the only ship sunk during wartime by a nuclear submarine. There are two other instances that are related. The USS Bremerton used one torpedo to sink the derelict forebody of the Panamanian cargo ship MV New Carissa, which was sunk in March of 1999. The stern remains wedged in the shoreline near Coos Bay, Oregon. There was a terrible storm and the ship hit the shore and broke up. The USS Greenville collided with and sunk the Japanese fishery training vessel Hime Maru about 10 miles south of Oahu in February of 2001. Sadly, 9 souls were lost in that accident. So of all the ships sunk at Pearl Harbor, we don't know which one was sunk first, but we do know which one was sunk last. The USS Phoenix. 41 years later, to be exact. That is why this is a bit of history you probably didn't know.